The kitchen is quiet. A glass of milk sits on the table, white and completely ordinary. Somewhere behind it, an entire biological story is hiding in plain sight. A cow produced it. A calf was supposed to drink it. And yet, for thousands of years, humans turned that animal's milk into breakfast, butter, yogurt, cheese, and an enormous global industry. Now imagine walking past a pigsty at sunrise. Inside, a mother pig lies on her side while a dozen tiny piglets push and scramble toward her. They fight for position. They squeal. They nurse. And suddenly, three strange questions appear. What if we simply replaced cow's milk with pig's milk? What if tomorrow every supermarket stopped selling cow's milk and started selling milk from pigs instead? And what if pig's milk is not only drinkable, but actually contains everything a growing mammal needs? Because pigs do produce milk. So why have humans almost completely ignored it? The obvious answer seems simple. Perhaps pig's milk is somehow unsuitable for us. But here's where the mystery begins. There is nothing inherently magical about cow's milk. Milk is not a substance that belongs to cows. It is a biological solution produced by mammals to feed their young. So if a pig is a mammal, and a sow can nourish a litter with her milk, why did civilization build dairy farms around cows, goats, sheep, and buffalo, while almost nobody built a pig dairy? The first clue appears when we stop looking at the milk itself and watch the mother. Imagine a farmer trying to milk a sow. A cow can stand calmly while milk flows into a bucket. A goat can be milked in a similar way. But the sow is different. Her piglets don't simply attach themselves and drink continuously. Nursing happens in short, highly coordinated episodes. In a classic 1982 study of the pig milk ejection reflex, researchers recorded the pressure inside mammary glands while piglets nursed. The result was astonishing. Milk ejection lasted only about 8 to 41 seconds. Then it was over. And the researchers found that milk ejection was closely associated with oxytocin, the hormone involved in the mammary letdown response. For the piglets, this makes perfect sense. They know the rhythm. They stimulate the udder. The sow responds. Her hormone levels rise. The milk suddenly becomes available. Then the window closes. But for a human trying to collect that milk, the problem becomes obvious. How do you build a dairy industry around an animal whose milk arrives in tiny biological windows designed for a litter of hungry piglets? And what happens if the milk itself turns out to be perfectly nutritious? That is exactly where things become stranger. Modern studies show that sow's milk is rich in nutrients. Research measuring milk throughout lactation has found substantial levels of fat, protein, and lactose, with the composition changing as the piglets grow. One study measured roughly 5% protein, 7 to 8% fat, and about 5% lactose during much of lactation. Another study found that early SAW's milk could contain considerably more fat and protein, while the composition changed over the course of lactation. So the mystery becomes more uncomfortable. Pig's milk isn't useless. It isn't some biological mistake. It is doing exactly what milk is supposed to do. It is building pigs. And that might be the problem, because nature didn't design the sow's milk system for humans. It designed it for piglets. A newborn piglet is born into a world where survival depends on gaining weight quickly. In research on lactating sows, individual piglets can consume hundreds of grams of milk per day, with intake increasing dramatically during the first weeks of life. The sow isn't producing milk for one enormous glass. She's producing it for a crowd. And suddenly the question changes. Maybe we don't avoid pig's milk because we can't drink it. Maybe we avoid it because collecting it makes almost no sense. But here's where the story takes another turn. Imagine someone solving the engineering problem. What if we developed specialized equipment to stimulate the sow? What if we used controlled oxytocin release? What if we collected every tiny milk ejection event? Scientists have actually studied the mechanics. In experiments, researchers found that administering oxytocin could trigger milk ejection in lactating sows, demonstrating just how tightly the process is controlled by the hormone. So technically, humans can interfere with the system. But now comes the unexpected question. If we can make it happen, why don't we? Because solving a biological problem doesn't necessarily solve an economic one. A dairy cow has been shaped by centuries of selective breeding and farming to produce large quantities of milk that humans can collect efficiently. The cow's body and human agriculture eventually became partners. The pig never followed that path. And there is a deeper reason. A pig is extraordinarily valuable for another product, meat. For much of human history, if you raise a pig, the obvious economic goal is not to keep a sow producing milk for months. It is to raise pigs efficiently for food. The entire agricultural system surrounding the animal developed around that goal. And once a society builds its infrastructure around one use, alternatives become increasingly difficult to justify. This is where history quietly shapes biology. Humans didn't sit down one morning and vote that cow's milk should become normal, while pig's milk should become strange. It happened gradually. People already lived alongside certain animals. Some animals were relatively easy to handle. Their milk could be collected repeatedly. Their reproductive cycles fit agricultural systems. Their products could be stored, traded, fermented, and transformed. Cows became dairy animals. Goats became dairy animals. Sheep became dairy animals. Buffalo became dairy animals. The pig followed another road. And eventually, the cultural expectation became so powerful that we stopped noticing the choice at all. Think about how strange that is. When you pour milk into coffee, you probably don't think, this is a mammary secretion from another species. You think breakfast, you think cereal, you think coffee, you think normal. But normal is often just history that has become invisible. And pig's milk exposes that invisible history. Because if the milk were chemically impossible for humans to consume, the mystery would be easy. But the biology is not that simple. The milk contains fat, protein, lactose, minerals, energy, the same broad nutritional language shared by mammalian milk. And yet we almost never encounter it. So perhaps taste is the answer. Maybe pig's milk tastes terrible. But even here, we have to be careful. Taste is not a universal biological law. Human cultures have consumed milk from many different mammals, and the flavor of milk changes with species, diet, fat composition, and processing. A food can be unfamiliar without being poisonous, and something can be perfectly edible without becoming popular. That distinction matters, because humans have eaten stranger things than pig's milk. We have fermented insects, we have eaten raw fish, we have turned mold into cheese, we have learned to drink bitter plants, fermented grains, and liquids that would have seemed bizarre to earlier generations. So why didn't somebody simply try pig's milk and decide it was delicious? Perhaps somebody did, and that possibility is more interesting than the answer, because the historical record does contain occasional attempts to investigate unusual animal milks, but no large pig dairy tradition emerged. And that absence tells us something. Sometimes an invention doesn't fail because it is impossible. It fails because nothing about it makes enough sense to continue. Now imagine a modern laboratory. A researcher measures sow's milk molecule by molecule. They aren't asking whether humans should drink it. They're asking what it does for a piglet. The answer leads into a much bigger story. Sow's milk changes during lactation. Early milk is different from later milk. Colostrum carries a powerful immune function, with antibodies playing an especially important role immediately after birth. Later, the balance of nutrients shifts as the piglets develop. The milk isn't static. It is responding. It is communicating with a growing body. And suddenly, milk looks less like a beverage and more like a biological message. The cow does this. The goat does this. The sheep does this. The pig does this. Every mammal is running some variation of the same ancient program, which means the real mystery may not be why we don't drink pig's milk. The real mystery may be why humans decided that some mammalian milk belonged in our culture, while other mammalian milk remained almost invisible. And the answer reaches beyond agriculture. Humans are unusually good at turning biological possibilities into cultural habits. We don't eat everything we can eat. We don't drink everything we can drink. We choose. Then we build systems around those choices. Factories, markets, recipes, traditions, laws, advertising, memories. Eventually, a choice becomes a civilization. A child grows up seeing milk poured from a carton. That child never needs to know why the carton came from a cow rather than a pig. The decision was made centuries before they were born. And perhaps that's the most fascinating part. Nature gave pigs milk. Nature gave cows milk. Nature gave goats milk. Humanity looked at all of these possibilities and built an enormous world around only a few of them. So, do we never drink pig's milk because it is dangerous? Not simply because it is pig's milk. Do we avoid it because pigs cannot produce milk? Obviously not. Do we avoid it because the milk contains no useful nutrients? The evidence says otherwise. The deeper answer is that the sow's body is extraordinarily inconvenient for industrial milking. Her milk is produced in short nursing events for a litter, and human agriculture never developed a large-scale system that made pig dairying economically attractive. But even that isn't the end, because somewhere beneath the practical explanation is a stranger truth. We often imagine civilization as something humans deliberately designed, but much of civilization is inherited momentum. Someone centuries ago made a choice, their children inherited it, then their children, and eventually we forgot it was ever a choice. So the next time you see a glass of milk sitting quietly on a kitchen table, perhaps look at it differently, not as something ordinary, but as the final product of an ancient partnership between human hands, animal biology, economics, culture, and chance. A cow never decided to become a dairy animal. A pig never decided not to. Humans simply built one relationship more successfully than the other. And that leaves one final question hanging in the air. How many things in our modern world are not there because they are the best possible choices, but simply because long ago someone chose them first? Maybe pig's milk is not the strange thing. Maybe the strange thing is how easily a possibility disappears once an entire civilization learns to live without it.